Thank you very much, dear Claudia, for inviting me to this evening. I thank you very much for your presence. Especially I'm happy to see Reverend Father Paisley, whose parish I visited already several years ago. And I am happy to see all of you here. First I will explain a little bit the project which Claudia mentioned. In Belarus, you know, it's a country of ex-Soviet Union, Belarus. The Catholics are there in a minority, maybe 10%. The majority are Orthodox. And I've known a good committed Catholic man, father of family. He has 5 children. He is the leader of the pro-life movement in Belarus, a kind of Human Life International section, and he is doing a good work there. And now his plan is to have a center for Catholic families, so that Catholic families can come and have formation, and also to have there a chapel for the traditional Latin Mass. It will be the first in that eastern part, in Belarus. They have in Minsk, in the capital city, the Society of Christ X, and there where he is in the east, in Bodilov, and there is once a month only. But recently I met the president of the Bishops' Conference of Belarus. He is a very good bishop. He came to Kazakhstan on the occasion of the visit of the Pope recently. You know, Pope Francis visited Kazakhstan. And so there came 2 bishops of Belarus, the president of the Bishops' Conference, and he is very friendly to the traditional Mass also. To the difference to the bishops in Russia, the Latin Catholic bishops, there are only 4 for the entire Russia. In Moscow, in Saratov, this is the Volga River, and then 2 in Siberia, Novosibirsk, the western Siberia, and Irkutsk, the eastern Siberia. But unfortunately, these Catholic bishops, they are not friendly to the traditional Mass in Russia. There is only in Moscow twice a month, and in St. Petersburg also once a month, and no more. And then in Kazakhstan, unfortunately, we have also no traditional Mass. Our bishops are not so open to this, so I am celebrating only privately in my Episcopal chapel, and sometimes in the seminary where I'm teaching also, and no more. So that you know the situation of the Latin Mass in the East, so it's very poor, I would say. And so this man, Vladislav is his name, he loves the traditional Mass and wants to have this center where to build a chapel for the traditional Mass, a house for formation for Catholic families, and he presented already a very detailed project. I transmitted this to Claudia. It's not so big amount because there in the East it's not so expensive as here in the United States or in Europe to purchase a house and to build a chapel and so on, or territory land. And so I would like to ask your charity to support this first Catholic traditional center in Belarus. Good. And now I would like to share with you several of you asked me already about a little bit about my background, my life, and about Kazakhstan. So substantially, you can read this in the book Christus Vincit. There I wrote the story of my life, but only to make a short summary. I belong to the so-called Germans, the Black Sea Germans from the Russian Empire. There were two settlements, the Volga Germans in the Volga River and the Black Sea Germans. And my parents come from these German settlements there. Originally they came from Alsace-Lorraine, so I know all my ancestors. For 200 years old, they came all from Alsace-Lorraine, so I'm substantially a German from Alsace, close to Strasbourg. Even I know the village where they went to the Russian Empire in the 19th century. And so they lived there, they were committed Catholics, my parents and my grandparents. And during the Second World War, they were evacuated, these Germans, by the German army to Eastern Germany to protect them from the communist army, which was already coming to the Black Sea shore. And at the end of the war, 1945, the Soviet army occupied Eastern Germany, as you know, and they arrested all these Black Sea Germans, 300,000 people, and brought them back to Soviet Union for forced labor. And so my parents, they came to the Ural Mountains. And it was a horrible situation. 1/3 of the people died of frozen and starvation. And it was a miracle that my parents survived there. They said to me always, and this was only the Catholic faith which gave them the strength, even the moral and spiritual strength to survive in these situations. And they were praying, even exhausted, they were praying. This was their last, anchor of salvation and strength. And you see how important is the Catholic faith to practice these already in childhood, all your life, and when you come in a situation of distress and horrible situation, then the Catholic faith which you have practiced and lived since your childhood or youth and so on, will give you the strength, the moral strength to survive. And this did my parents. And they organized there in the Ural Mountains, helped to organize a clandestine church, underground church. My parents were so-called activists in the underground church. They were hiding priests, helping to organize prayers and so on. And after this horrible situation there in the Ural Mountains, they were freed. And then they moved to Central Asia, to Kyrgyzstan. It is south of Kazakhstan, where I was born. And there were a lot of Germans, and so they organized again a clandestine church in Kyrgyzstan, my parents. And so I grew up in a catacomb church there. I remember very well the masses, the hidden masses, during the night, the door closed, the windows, and the mass was a very low voice because the police could hear. So these were my memories of my childhood, the clandestine holy masses. Of course, it was the traditional Latin mass. Priests celebrated these. And then we moved to Estonia, the Baltic states. It was still part of the Soviet Union. And there we had a holy priest, a church which was tolerated by the regime, and we could go there, but it was also dangerous because the police always watched, but we managed to go there, and I received the first Holy Communion, where I was 10, and then after, from Estonia, at the end of 73, by a miracle of Our Lady, we could escape Soviet Union and go to West Germany. And then when we came to West Germany, it was a real shock for us. I was almost 30, and there were 4 children. I am the youngest. But we saw all this moral degradation in the society already in Germany, the Western world, the immorality, all this. We could not understand this. And worse still was our shock in the church when we went to the Catholic churches. It was the priests were so worldly, the liturgies were so worldly, not sacred. The greatest shock for us was the communion in hand, which we saw for the first time with horror. I remember as a child I could not understand this, because these holy priests, the confessors and martyrs, which I had the privilege to have in my childhood, they imbued us with such a deep reverence and faith to the Holy Sacrament, to the Holy Communion, that I had these received. And even I was a boy, I could not understand such a horrible scenario, to receive the Lord in the hand. And my mother was only crying, she was weeping, she could not understand this. And therefore I wrote my first book, which is The Lord, Dominus Est, about the dangers of the communion in hand. Because of this, but I remember these moments of tragedy with my mother. She was weeping about this horrible situation with the communion in hand. And later, I became a religious man in the Order of the Holy Cross, the Canons Regular in Austria. It is linked with the movement of the Holy Angels work. And then I was sent to Brazil, to the mission. And there I was studying philosophy and theology, Portuguese language, with a holy bishop, really a holy bishop. He already passed away, Bishop Athanasius in central Brazil. And he renewed the diocese from a ruin. He took the diocese when he became bishop, a young bishop, in a ruin, spiritual, the theology of liberation, it was such a Marxist movement within the church, destroyed completely the diocese. And he took over such a ruin, and he asked our congregation to help him, and so we came to Brazil to help him. And he took over the seminary and the theological faculty, and so I was in the first group who came to help him as a young religious. And he was my teacher, also Bishop Manuel. He ordained me priest, and I was 7 years in Brazil. I am so grateful to the providence of God that I had this holy bishop as my teacher and ordained me. And when I became bishop 16 years ago, he was still alive. He was already retired, but he came from Brazil to Rome, where I was ordained. I was ordained in the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, bishop. And he came to participate in my ordination, and he gave me his pectoral cross, his own pectoral cross. And I am keeping this pectoral cross only for solemn occasions. So I say loosely, simply for pontifical masses or for ordinations, because it's so, for me, it's a treasure. So, and then I was sent to Rome to do the doctorate in patristics. This is the Church Fathers. And then I was working in the general age of the order as a counselor. And then someone came from Kazakhstan and presented a priest to me, and they asked me to help them to come to Kazakhstan to teach for teaching seminarians. I still had known the Russian language. I did not forget the Russian language. They use the Russian language still today there. And so my superior sent me 22 years ago to Kazakhstan. It's basically almost the same place where I was born, not so far away, in Karaganda. There I was in the seminary and teaching, and I was spiritual father for 5 years. And then I was appointed auxiliary bishop 16 years ago, Benedict XVI, and was consecrated bishop in Rome, in the Basilica of St. Peter. It was not my idea to be there consecrated in Rome, but the Cardinal Secretary of State wanted to consecrate me there in Rome, and he phoned to Kazakhstan saying to the nuncio he would like to do this, and so I agreed. I did not choose neither the place nor the date nor the bishops who ordained me. So, and then in Karaganda, in my previous diocese, I started to build a cathedral of Our Lady of Fatima, a new Gothical cathedral, because there was in Kazakhstan one of the greatest gulags. You know, Gulag, this is a camp of concentration of communism. One of the greatest in the entire Soviet Union was in Karaganda, in my first diocese, outside. And so the soil of Karaganda is really with the tears and the blood of so many victims, innocent victims. And therefore I decided it had to be a beautiful church, as a church of reparation, atonement also, and a memorial. But when I started this, I said it should be the most beautiful what I can do for the Lord, the most sacred and beautiful what I can do. And I try to do. So it is a neo-Gothical, this beautiful high altar in wooden carved, made in Südtirol. And so I hope it was it succeed for the glory of the Lord. And so this cathedral became really our attraction. So many people already converted to Catholicism, few from Islam, when they saw the church and entered. They were overwhelmed by the atmosphere of sacredness, of beauty, really. And therefore I said, when I began to build, we will evangelize with the stones and with the beauty. Evangelize this. And so there was a story, a nice story. They were walking two Muslim ladies on the road and seeing this church, our new Fatima church, and they have there a statue of Our Lady of Fatima on the roof, outside, on the facade. And these two ladies were observing this church, and one was asking the other, what kind of building is this here? And the other lady answers, this is a Catholic mosque. I have built a Catholic mosque. So, and then I was transferred to the capital city, Astana, 11 years ago as auxiliary. And since then I'm there. I try to speak in the church, not to be silent, not always speak, but when there is necessary, when there is serious confusions and errors, I have to speak. I cannot be silent. And I have nothing to lose. In Washington I have this lady, I know her for several years. And once I was in Washington DC and she was driving me. it was during the Synod of the Family, and I prepared a statement criticizing this ambiguous language about family, about divorce, communion for divorce, you know. I was criticizing this. And I told her that I will publish such a text. And she asked me, are you not afraid to do this? And I answered her, I have nothing to lose. And then she answered me, if you will not do this, you will lose everything. Beautiful. American woman told me, Bishop, you will lose everything. You will do everything when you will not do this. So, and as I told recently in Kazakhstan, the Pope came, so you know, to Kazakhstan last month to an interreligious meeting. Unfortunately, this is not so good that the Pope is participating in interreligious meetings. And he came, and of course he visited also, it was a Holy Mass for the Catholics, and the meeting with the bishops and priests. I was in charge for the liturgy, so I could prepare at least a worthy Holy Mass, Latin, and so Pope Francis must be surprised, but he did. I was close to him during the Mass, I was observing him. And we were singing Missa de Angelis in Gregorian chant. And communion, not only kneeling on the tongue, he could kneel us all over. But he was in a good shape, he was in a good mood, he was friendly to me. And then, next day, it was a meeting in the cathedral, in our cathedral, without Holy Mass, but only a meeting with priests and bishops and sisters. And they were the papal MCs, and I was in charge of the liturgy. Before the Pope came to the cathedral, the papal MC told me to correct a little bit the songs, the order of the songs. And so I had to go to the choir loft, to the organist. This was a sister, she was playing organ, to tell her when she asked to chant the Salve Regina. I went up and said this to the sister, and there were a lot of journalists in the choir loft there, the performers. And so 50 journalists there. And 2 from the United States, Reuters and Ronald Crooks. And I wanted to go down, and they stopped me, the journalists, and no intention to give an interview. And they stopped me and said, please, can you give us a short interview? I said, okay. And then Reuters asked me, oh, Bishop, you are known as a bishop who is criticizing the Pope. And now the Pope is coming here to your cathedral. How do you explain this? And I said to her, and this was published in we bishops, we are not employees of the Pope. We are brothers of the Pope, not employees and slaves. And we have to say to the Pope, and I do this when I see something is wrong in the church seriously, in my conscience, I have to say this to the Pope, of course, with due respect, respectfully, with charity. But I have to say this to the Pope. And I said, the bishops should not do adoration and incense to the Pope. This is not charity. But to do a fraternal correction is a form of collegiality. This as I said. And the other asked, but how do you see that the Pope is participating in the interreligious meeting? I said, I consider this is harmful for the uniqueness of the Catholic faith, because there is only one Catholic faith, one religion, This is the Catholic faith, one true religion, which God wants, and no others, I say this. And when these interreligious meetings, the Catholic faith in Jesus Christ becomes one of others, no? On the side of the others. And this is undermining the uniqueness of the Catholic faith, I thought so. And these meetings, they leave an impression that we have a kind of supermarket of religions. So I said this and went down, and then came the Pope. I had to greet the Pope. So he was kind to me. He did not hear the interview. Maybe later when it was published. But he was nice to me. I accompanied him after the meeting. I was the only one bishop who accompanied him to that car, because all the bishops remained in the cathedral. And my archbishop, he had to go to a car to accompany the Pope with the car. So I was the only one bishop who accompanied the Pope to the door with his bodyguards. And so, therefore, I had to accompany him until the car there. And he was nice to me, laughing and smiling. Yes, because I do this out of love for him, even when I have to criticize him. Of course, I couldn't speak with him serious things because we were surrounded by people. But if I will have an occasion to be alone with him, without others, I will tell him, Holy Father, I am your best friend. Really, serious. Because I never in my life prayed so much for no one as for you, Pope Francis. It is true. I never celebrated so many holy masses for no one as for Pope Francis. And so he has to be considering this also. That this is friendship. And not to do adoration. So, but he published this tragic document, as you know, Traditionis Custodes, when he spoke in Pittsburgh, in the Catholic Identity Conference about this. And therefore I think out of fidelity and love for Holy Mother Church, and for the honor of the Apostolic See itself, bishops, priests, and faithful in you, you are obliged to preserve the tradition and form of the Holy Mass and of the sacraments. It could even go so far that one day we be forced to celebrate the traditional liturgy underground, or in the catacombs for the time being, in order to pass it on to the younger generations. Now, in some places, it's already celebrated in private houses or in private chapels, in gyms, like in Arlington. I will there celebrate on October 21st a solemn Mass in honor of Blessed Emperor Charles, not in a church. But this is also God blesses also these places. You know, the catacombs were very much blessed by God and brought many fruits. And so I think also this is a temporary situation where the traditional Mass is banished to gyms and to private houses. And this will bear many fruits, believe, many fruits. And because the traditional liturgy is invincible. For example, I will share with you an example. My former Archbishop, whom I was auxiliary in my former diocese, he is retired. And when I was his auxiliary, I already started to celebrate the traditional Mass. And he had known this, and he had respected me. But he himself had no interest in the traditional Mass. He was a pious man, but traditional Mass, no. But he had respect to me, for me. Okay. And then he retired and went to Poland. He is a Polish. And I think 3 years ago, he phoned me. Sometimes he phones me, oh, I will tell you a good news. Good news. Which good news? Today, I celebrated for the first time in my life the traditional Mass, said he, the retired Archbishop. And I said to him, congratulations to you. And then I asked him, what were your impressions after you have celebrated for the first time? And he said to me these words, it was a difference as between heaven and earth. Wow. Such conviction. The traditional Mass is heaven, the nobles earth is earth. This was his words of my former Archbishop. And he never had interest in the traditional Mass, never. Because some priest there approached him and said, Excellency, do you want I could teach you to celebrate the traditional Mass? And he said, okay, let us try. And then and now he said he is always celebrating traditional Mass. And this year I was also in Poland doing confirmations in the old rite. Thanks to the brother, is still a good bishop who allowed me this, even a pontifical highness. And I was in the house of this bishop. And he has a housekeeper, a religious sister, a very pious, I have known her. And she never in her life also assisted the traditional Mass, never. And so, and with me was a priest, and he was in the morning celebrating in the private chapel of the bishop his own traditional Mass. And he invited the sister, when you want, you can assist my private Mass. And she said, okay. And she, for the first time in her life, assisted a simple private low Mass of a priest. And then at the breakfast, I was with her and with the priest. I asked her sister, what were your impressions about after you for the first time assisted the traditional Mass? And she said these 3 words. She said, sacredness, beauty, and silence. This struck her. Most struck her, she said, she never in her life experienced such sacredness, beauty, and silence. So you see, this is the power of the traditional Mass. It is the power of the prayer of the Holy Mother Church since the ages, and such a great liturgical treasure of the Church. Traditional Mass cannot simply be destroyed. And so, as I taught in Pittsburgh, let us say hypothetically, a Pope will come and say, you have not to pray more the Apostles' Creed. I will give you a new formula of the Creed. And you will not be allowed more to pray the old formula of the Creed. I will give you a new one. Even if it would be orthodox and correct. Imagine what would be said. A Pope is forbidding us to pray an apostolic creed which was prayed for at least millennium. And the same is the traditional Mass. It is a formula of prayer which was prayed since millennium. And now it is almost forbidden, also persecuted, and this is for me the same almost, because the traditional Mass is not a Tridentine Mass in no way. It was already, we have missals and texts 100 years before the Council of Trent. It's the same ordomisse, the same, identical. Where was the reform? There was no reform. The reform was Pius V only did the missal, not the mass. This is a distinction. And we have already in the 12th century a beautiful, precisely commentary to the early detail of the Holy Mass of Pope Innocent III and of the 12th century. So it is not a Mass of 500 years, as some would say, from the Council of Trent. No. This already we have text from the 12th century. The same prayers we explain, the same gestures the Pope explains. It is the Pope of the time of St. Francis of Assisi, Innocent III, and so on. We have to know these historical facts. But this is a Mass of almost 1 millennium. You cannot simply say this millennium, we substitute this with a new one. Because they say, as Pius V made reform, so also Paul VI made the reform of Mass. This is wrong, completely wrong. It's not historical, it's a fake. Simply because Pius V did not reform the Mass, even precisely not. He simply took the traditional century-old form of the Roman Church and imposed this to the entire Western churches, because there was chaos of liturgy in those times. And he said, this, our old, unchanging right in Rome is the most surest, and you have to take this, he said, with exception of those who had more than 200 years. And so, but the new Mass was a completely new invention on the table of academics. It's never happened in 2000 years. Therefore, we cannot accept this. Of course, the new order is valid, of course, if it is celebrated according to the rules, I have to say. And sometimes it is doubtful, sometimes, if the rules or some priests, I mean, when they change the words of the consecration, then it could be invalid. But in any case, I think that the presence of the traditional form of the Mass is such a problem, and it will, by time, grow. And then the Church will come a time, and must come a time, when the Pope himself in Rome will celebrate a solemn traditional Mass in the Basilica of St. Peter. This is logical. This must be, because the Holy See Rome is the pillar, the rock of the entire Catholic tradition, but it is currently occupied Rome by forces who want to destroy the tradition, the Catholicism. It's occupied. Well, the occupation will end, because the Holy See is in the hand of God, ultimately. Not in the hand of Pope Francis or Paul VI, no. It's in the hand of Christ. And it's only a temporary phenomenon. The Holy See is in a kind of exile, because it's occupied by powers of the enemies. Not completely, but to a large extent, as we see. How can we ever say that the discrimination of such a holy, venerable right of millennium is not a work of those who hate, really, Catholicism? Or to love, maybe they love more Protestantism than Catholicism, and the world. And so therefore we have not to be discouraged. We have to continue, and therefore I am so grateful that there exists this Christus Vincit Foundation to support those priests and monasteries, to to maintain the tradition. And now you will extend this even so far as to the east. Because, you know, we Catholics, we must be really Catholics. What does mean Catholic? Catholic means branching the entire world. This is Catholic. Not only our country. Catholic is all countries, all nations. This is Catholic. This is the beauty of it. So, you know this. What is Catholic? What is always? What was always? What sempre? What was in all places, so in all nations? This is Catholic. Ubique. And which was held and believed by all above us. This is the St. Vincent of Foundation. And this is, therefore we have to widen our horizon in the love and the promotion of the traditional Mass also. So our support for the Latin Mass is not an act of disobedience to the Pope, even if some priests are forbidden today by their bishops, unfortunately, to celebrate the traditional Mass. They must not obey. They can surely celebrate in a discreet manner, maybe privately, at least, the traditional Mass. And with this they will do a great contribution to our Holy Mother Church. It is not disobedience. Because the letter of the law, we are not Pharisees. The letter of the law is not the first in the church, in the kingdom of God. The truth, it is the first. And the letter of the law is secondary. Because we are not Pharisees, you know. And we need the law also, of course, we are not Protestants. But it is subordinated to the faith, to the truth. And then a command of the Pope or the Bishop, which is the law, is the letter of the law, is harming, attacking the integrity of the faith and the liturgy. Then we can't do it. Then we have to say, no, now the precedence, the faith, and the tradition. And we do this for the sake, in union with all the saints, the popes before, and with the popes who will come. The Catholic strong popes will come again. And we do now the work, and later they will say to us, to you all, thank you that you were faithful in these difficult times. Thank you even if you were temporarily disobedient to the Holy See, formally, but you were obedient to the popes of all times, of the Catholics. And so we have also to know that Pius V, in his papal bull, Quo Primum Tempore, practically canonized this form of prayer. Because the Holy Mass is prayer. But what? It's prayer. This form, solemn, venerable form of prayer, canonized. And he said very boldly, by the present law, in virtue of our apostolic authority, we grant and concede in perpetuity, that for the chanting and reading of the Mass in any church whatsoever, this missal is hereafter to be followed absolutely, without any scruple of conscience. Without any scruple of conscience. So please, you have not scruple of conscience. You can celebrate even in formal disobedience to the bishop, because Pius V in his Paul said this, without any scruple of conscience or fear of incurring any penalty, you can celebrate this Mass. This is a law, also a law of the Church of the tradition. And so, the priest will do this not with respect, with love for the Pope and the Bishop. even when we are temporarily not obeying the letter of the laws, but we are living the spirit of our Mother, Holy Mother Church of all times. So, and only to quote some example, we have in the 4th century the Arian crisis. You know, there was a huge confusion in the church in the 4th century. Heresy, the Arianism, they denied the divinity of the Son of God, practically abolished the Holy Trinity. And the majority of the bishops in those times accepted, collaborated, as is imagined. And only a few bishops remained faithful. St. Athanasius in the first place, St. Basil of the Great, and the good Catholics who remained faithful to the tradition in the 4th century, they were expelled from the churches. They could not celebrate Mass in the churches because they were only because they were faithful to the tradition. You see some parallels with our time. They are. And so, and I will quote from a letter of St. Basil of those times. It's very, you see, it is very timely. He wrote, "The doctrines of the true Catholic faith are overthrown." Again, please. "The laws of the Church are in confusion. The ambition of man who have no fear of God rushes into high posts in the Church." High posts in the Church, they say bishops and cardinals. "And high run to exalted offices. And now, exalted offices in the church hierarchy is now in our day known as the price of impiety." The price of impiety. They receive high offices. This was in the 4th century. But you see, we have the same in our time. And he says, the result is that the worse a man in the church blasphemes, the fitter one seek him to be a candidate for a bishop. The words was amazing. Clerical dignity is a thing of the past. There is a complete lack of man shepherding the Lord's flock. Ambitious men are constantly throwing away the provision for the poor on their own enjoyment of the distribution of gifts. There is complete immunity in sinning. For when men have been placed in high church offices by the favor of men, they are obliged to return the favor by continually showing indulgence to sins and to offenders. Just judgment is a thing of the past. Vice and sins knows no bounds. And now the very vindication of the right faith, the orthodoxy, is looked upon in some quarters as an opportunity for attacking persons when someone is orthodox. And the unbelievers are laughing in those times, the unbelievers, the pagans, about the situation in the church. Men of weak faith are shaken. Faith is uncertain, became uncertain. Souls are drenched in ignorance because adulterators of the word of God imitate the truth. The mouth of the true believers in the church are dumb, while every blasphemous tongue in the church wags free. holy things are trodden underfoot. Today, the Holy Communion, our Lord is trampled, through the communion hand. So, here he says in the 1st century, even you must have heard, he writes this letter to the Pope, Damasus. Even you must have heard what is going on in most of our cities here in the East, some basically from the East. How our people who are faithful to the tradition, with wives and children and even our old men, stream out before the walls of the city in open air and offer their prayers in open air, putting up with all the inconvenience of the weather with great patience and waiting and sighing for help from the Lord. So St. Basil. You see, we have some parallels to our time. And so we can say today this conviction to those bishops who want to restrict or to extinguish the traditional Mass, they will not succeed. Even we could say to the Pope and to the others, his counselors, you will not succeed to extinguish the traditional Mass. No. And in these dark moments, when the traditional Catholics and priests, they are oftentimes also humiliated, unjustly labeled as rigid ones, as Neo-Pelagians and so on. We should consider this as an honor, to unjustly be treated only because of our unshakable fidelity and love to the monarch, our forefathers, and the saints have for centuries, millennium celebrated the Holy Mass. We firmly hope that there will come the time, and hopeful not in a too far future, when the traditional form of the Mass, or a very close variant of it, will again shine bright in all Catholic churches, the entire world, and firstly in the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome. And how could it be otherwise? Since the Catholic Church is the pillar and ground of the truth. So the liturgical exile of our day will end. We are already on the way back from exile. Since we are accompanied by a very large number of saints, of popes, of generations of simple and faithful Catholics from so many ages and countries, we can say to those spiritually blinded and arrogant churchmen of our day, who disdain the treasure of the traditional rite, we can say to them, you will not succeed, since you are fighting against the work which the Holy Spirit so carefully and artfully has woven throughout centuries and ages and millennia. And so the faithfulness of the simplicity, the humility of the little ones in the church will win. God will make true in our time as well what he spoke to the prophet. This is the one to whom I will look, he who is humble and contrite in spirit. And we have to answer to the Lord in the midst of the liturgical exile with its ruins, paraphrasing Psalm 25, O Lord, I love the beauty of thy house, which is the traditional rite of the Mass, and the glory of thy dwelling, which is the Eucharistic Lamb of Christ, in our churches, in our hearts also. So each time we enter into the celebration of the venerable and millennium-old traditional rite of the Mass, let us speak with the words of the Psalm, 121. I rejoiced at the promise that was said to me, we shall go into the house of the Lord. And this is our joy in the traditional rite of the Mass, and this joy in the traditional rite of the Mass no one shall take from us.